Okay, so we're back. It's COMP1004, Windows 2017. That's our Windows Winter 2017, and it's week 1, part 3 of our broadcast. We just finished talking about how you should build a little calculator app, and I just said for people in the room, I wanted to rename my calculator from form 1 to calculator form by right-clicking and renaming. Okay, that's the first thing I wanted to do. Next. My title bar, this is extras. My title bar says form 1. I'm going to change this to calculator in the text field, right? I'm going to change my size to 320 by 480 like I asked you to do, which is going to be here, 320 by 480. It's roughly the same height. And then I asked you as a hint, I said, hey, put in your table layout panel, which is kind of right here. And the table layout panel, I can edit rows and columns. And I know that I need, if I have my example calculator for a second, I know I'm not going to need this line or this line, but I am going to need, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows and 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. 5 rows by 4 columns. Okay, that's what I'm going to need. 5 rows by 4 columns. If I look at the number of rows right now, there's 2 columns. If I look at as an example, right now it's looking at columns. If I look at rows, I want to have 5 rows in there. So I want to kind of add a bunch of rows. There's my rows. That's the first thing I would do. And it can't be 50% and 20, 20, 20. That doesn't make sense. These are absolute. I want them all to be percentages, right? So what's 5 rows divided by 100? 20%, right? 5 divided by 100, 20%. That's the first thing that I would do. And so that means all of these would have to be 20% each. If I do it properly. Thank you, Tom. All of those would have to be 20%. So that's 20, not 28. So 20. And I would do the same thing with this one really quickly. If I kind of select all of them, you're saying, can it work all the same? It can, right? So I kind of change them all to 20, right? Very good. Don't use auto size. Right, closing up, I got all my row sizes the way they are. So row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I need 4 columns, right? 4 columns. I'm going to go back to columns. Notice again, there's only 2. I'll add a couple more columns. There's 4 columns. That means the sizes are 25%, right? So again, this way I can just highlight the whole thing, right? Change this whole thing to percent, 25. And I have my layout, right? There it is. Layout of 25. Now, if this isn't spaced out properly, I probably want to make it so that it kind of spans from here to here, right, roughly, and from here to here, at least at the bottom. So it looks like they're buttons. And maybe I even want to make it bigger if I want to make my calculator buttons bigger. This is the size of my buttons, roughly. So I've got my layout. Now, my layout's not called anything, but if I really want to, and best practice says I should probably name it, I could say that this is my calculator table layout. And that's what I probably should call it. So calculator table layout. If I want to ever refer to something else, I would kind of name this thing something. All right. And then I would drag and drop one button. Okay, one button. So I'm going to go to the top, grab a button, drag and drop it in, space it out so it's the right size. Right. Notice it can't go outside of its bounds, right, for my button because that's the way it is. And I would test it out. I would change my button and I would put the biggest number that I can fit in there, or the biggest weirdest symbol that's going to space out into my layout, which is probably going to be a 9 or some other weird symbol, right? So let's just put a 9 in there, or a 1. And if I want to, I have a guide, I have a reference, right? Here's my buttons. So where's the 0 going to be? Probably right here, right? This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And maybe what I'll do is I'll put the clear button on the left or in the middle somewhere. So let's put it here. So I'll use the C for the clear button, right? So I'm going to go there, change my text to C. Right, and I'm probably rename this thing the C button or clear button. So there's my clear button. Right? I can also, if I really want to, call it clear. This is pretty small, and so I'm probably going to change the font size right away to 20 because I think that's probably the right size for this layout. There it is, nice and big. See, it's in the middle. It looks about right. Now that I have this and it's layered the right way, and I've got my button name, I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to click into this cell here and paste, 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 paste. Done. Oops. Undo. Right? That's pretty quick, right? Buttons all laid out, right? Now I need just to go in there and fix everything. So I got to figure out where I want all my buttons, right? So you're definitely going to make this the 0 button. And I'm going to call that the 0 button. So first I'm going to rename this to 0. I know I'm cheating, but you know how it is. 0 button. Right? Here's the 0 button. And then here's the 1 button. Right? You're going to say, oh my God, Tom, you really have to do this? You know what? It's probably a good practice to put it in what the button name is. You can also call it button 1, button 2. That's actually relevant here. Button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, because they are those buttons. Button 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So this is 1, right? So you I'll put in 1 in here. Oops. And the same thing goes with this one. We can just do all the numbers first if you want to do it that way too, right? So you do the numbers. It's a good spacing. Again, we're just building user interfaces, right? So we're going to put them in approximately where they're supposed to be. You may have not done it this way, by the way. It's totally fine. And you know, it's not urgent that you get it done as fast as possible. I have a timeline because I got other things to talk to you about today and give you a chance to work on your assignment 1. So that's why I'm going a little faster than I normally would. I would explain a little bit more about this than I am doing right now. Okay, cool. So I've got all this. I've got some extra buttons that I don't need. I don't need this one, right? So I can get rid of it. So let's get rid of that button. And I don't need this one. Well, I do need that one. That's going to be my decimal. So that's my decimal. And that'll be my decimal button. Right, that's what that is. And now this, if I look at my design, starts off with equals, right? So that's my equals button. So equals button. Equals button. I call it equals or equals? Equals button. Equals. Sure. And then just put the symbol in there because it's just a string. And this is the, going back to this, plus, minus, times, and divide. I don't have a divide image, or else I would put that in there. So plus, and this is the plus button. You may have not named everything. It's okay. Minus button. Also, you can call it the subtract button or add button, right? It's totally cool. I'm just calling it minus and plus. And this would be the times and divide. Times, I'm probably going to use an X, right? So this is the times button. Should call it multiplication button, but too long. And this is divide. Now divide, you know, it's kind of weird. We don't have a divide symbol unless we use symbols for this. And so what I'm probably going to do is, I mean, again, I could do that, but just to be, you know, to cheat, I'm going to put the slash in there, right? So there's a slash. I need my C, but I don't need this button, so I can delete that one. I don't need this button. I can delete that one. And this one should be my clear button. I probably cleared my clear button. Let's see, I did. Clear button. And I'm going to go through here and just check that all the buttons are named properly. So 7 button, right? And the 8 button. Anyone not understand what I'm doing? Please flip your hand. I want to help. Right? And here's the 4 button. 5 button. Question for those people who are watching me and watching Paint Peel. Why am I naming everything like this? Why do I bother? Why not just button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Say that again. When I want to reference the button, that's your answer. It's easy for me to reference them because I know the name. Right? Where would I reference those buttons? On the code behind file, right? Whatever I name them here, it's going to be the same name on the code behind file, right? That's what it's going to be. You know what? Maybe I do want a button in there, so I'm going to kind of copy, paste, paste. Get rid of this one. I'll make this the backspace. And for the backspace symbol, let's do one of those with a B, something that's different, right? I'll say back button. Okay, there we go. Again, we can make this, as long as you know what it means. I'd probably put in symbols in here or images instead of just text. Now I need some kind of area in here for my for this part up here. I'm probably going to use a text box. Right, here's my text box. It's pretty small. I'm going to call this the result text box because that makes sense. Right, text box results. And I'm going to make this the same size, so it's going to be 20. And one of the requirements, there's a couple of requirements, right, that I wanted you to think about when you're doing this. So here's my text box. This is where it's going to be. It's going to go to the whole side, right? Probably going to space this down over here. There's going to be some space up here for other things for now. That's fine. Maybe I could add a logo, colors, whatever. I want to make my calculator look nice. I could also resize the buttons if I want to, or resize this thing so it's much larger so that it holds more information. But for now, for my basic calculator, this is enough, right? I do want a couple of effects from my text. And one of them is I want to align my text to the right, right? So notice that there's a text align method and it's left aligned. I can align it to the right, right? And I also want to give my text box a default value of 0. Right? Because it starts at 0, right? Okay, interface done. Okay. Is it pretty? Hell no. Is it the minimum viable product that I asked you to put together? Cool, let's test it. I asked you to put it in the middle of your screen. Some people said, well, I don't know how to move it to the middle of my screen. You don't have to. Remember, on the bottom, if I click on the form itself, on the bottom, it says start position is Windows Forms. I want to go, or Windows default, I want to go to center screen. That'll center it. And I also asked you, so it doesn't matter what size your font is, please change auto scale mode from font, right, to none. So that way it's exactly the same size of mine as yours, anyone else. If I run this thing now, it should start off in the middle. I shouldn't have any problems resizing it or anything weird like that. It should come up like this. Okay. And also notice that my C button is the one that's selected. What else should I do? What else should I do with this interface? And we're not going to touch anything else today, just the interface. I wanted to focus on that today only, right? Functionality, we're going to do more next week, right? And I'm going to put this up on GitHub so you have my calculator in case you couldn't do your beautiful one. You probably made a nicer one than I did, right? Although it wasn't required. I shouldn't be able to type in here, yeah? I shouldn't be able to do this. It shouldn't be allowed, right? So I got to make that read only. When you make that read only, your text box, notice there's a little bit of space between my text box and this part here. And that's the only issue that I have in my design. My text box should be read only. And notice there's a read only property. I can change to read only, but it turns it gray, which I hate, right? So what I'd probably want to do this for this is my back color, the back color property of my text box. I can certainly try and change this, right, my back color property to something else. And I'm probably going to go to the web. I can go to the web and make it white, right? There it is, the back color property. I can also change the, if I want the border style, here's my border style, is fixed 3D. I can also change to fixed single, which makes it a little kind of stand out as a border like this. So now it's read only. I can't type in there, right? It's still enabled. And what's the difference between enabled? Because there's an enabled disabled function as well as read only. Well, enable allows me to highlight the result. And maybe for my calculator, I want to be able to highlight the result, copy it somewhere else, right? If I made this thing disabled, okay, disabled, I can still do the same thing. So here's I stop the function. And if I click on my box and make it enabled is equal to false, so here's enabled. If I make this equal to false, it still looks the same. I still can't change it, but now I can't also highlight it and the text becomes gray, right? I may have a cause for this to make it disabled. There might be a reason, a user story or some kind of, reason to make it this way, right? There could be, but right now I may need to copy from it, and it doesn't make any sense for that to happen. So let's go back and make this enabled again. So enabled from false to true. Okay, that'll change it back. Other things are my C button is the one that is highlighted, right? That's where my highlight is going. That's where the tab control is going there first. As an example, I may want to make something else highlighted, but the C button is okay because that's the clear button. The equals button might be another good choice for doing that. And in order for me to do that, you can see that the tab control, if I look at here, my tab index is 1. My tab stop is true. Anytime I have my tab stop true, that means I can tab along the buttons. And a good user interface would allow me to tab the buttons in order. So from C all the way down, if I keep tabbing, it's going to go 7, 8, 9, da, 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 with my button, with my keyboard. Now mine, I'm not sure if it did that because I kind of erased and created them like haphazardly back and forth. So it may not do it that way because I didn't design it that way, right? But when you first create the buttons with that layout, if I press tab, notice it skips to there and then goes down here like this. That's an advantage of using the tab layout. Now it's going to go back to the back button because I added that after, right? See? And then go back to here and then finally back to there. So tab controls allow you to do that, and it'll actually show up. So the tab controls actually show up. What's the tab index? So this, you can see that this is index 1, and then this is index 21. That doesn't make any sense. It should be index 2 because that's right here, but that's where I created the button, and that's why it's index 21, because I created it afterwards after I created everything else. So you can rejig all that tab index stuff if you want to. Questions? User interfaces. Really, really quick. Any functionality? Yes. The tab functionality? Okay, how do I change it? I go through there and rename it. Now, there's other ways of doing it. There's changing this. There's actually a way of going in there and changing their tab functionality. I can just kind of change this to 2. But if I change this to 2, that's also 2, right? So I got to change to 3, 4, 5, 6, rename this whole thing, and change the tab functionality in order. It starts at 1 or 0, and you can go in order the one that you want. Okay, that's the way you would do it. Your tab index. Okay. If I never wanted to stop here, then I can change my tab index from true to false. So I can go false here, right? And that means no matter what I do, when I start pressing my tab button, it'll never get to my results text box. So if I go like this, right, it'll just keep going back down here. It'll never come up here if I put my tab stop as false. Okay, so tabbing in and tabbing out. All right. I want to make, before I let you guys go into your assignment number 1, I want to make a event handler for all my buttons, right? So any button that I press, any button. Like I'm talking like the plus, minus, the equal sign, whatever. Any button that I touch, I have a button pressed event or something like that, right? How do I do that? The easiest way to do is to make your own, want to double click on any button. This is the way to do it. So follow me here. Double click any button. I'm going to double click my clear button for a second, right? It creates my clear button click event. Let's rename it. Please don't rename it manually. Right? Sorry, I had to say that again like that because that will not work. Because remember, the clear button click event, right, is also in the designer one, the design side, right? So if you rename it manually here, what will it do? Break your code. I did that with my fist on my face to kind of really implement it. It'll break you. You go, Tom, I don't know what happened. My code broke. Don't do it that way. Right click on the bloody name here, right? And rename it right here. Or you can do Control R twice, right? If you do that, then the rename property comes up, which is really, really cool. And it allows you to rename it across your application, which is the right way. It's actually refactoring is what we're doing, right? So we're going to rename this thing to calculator button click, because any calculator button is going to be clicked, right? So calculator, notice how it stays green, button underscore click, right? The event, I'm going to click apply, and now it changes. And if I go back to my design, we're still good because it changes on the design side too. Yay! We're still golden. Okay, cool. Now, problem. I have only this one that points to it, my clear button click event. What can I do so that everything else points to it too? The easy thing to do is we select all the other ones. So select this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, all these ones here, select them all, right? So these are all the buttons. And now, notice that if I go to my click event here in my with my lightning bolt selected, and if I pull down, I have one event that's been decided on. I'm just going to point to that one. And now all of them point to the same event, right? This is called shared event handling. And I want to ask you to do that over and over again. I'm not going to want you to do one button, one event, not for everything. Sometimes we have no choice because it's so different that it doesn't make sense for you to use the same event. But in this case it does, right? Okay, so we have one event no matter what happens. this calculator button click event will trigger any button that I press, right? That's what will happen. Okay, now I need to know which button's pressed. And what am I going to use for that? The sender object. The sender object tells me, like I said before, which button I pressed, right? That's what it has, the information in there, right? And I need to make it, I need to be a couple things. I got to do a couple things with it to play with it, okay? Telling you some tricks. By the way, games, when we make games, when we make applications, lots of tricks, right? Especially the games. Games are all illusions, right? But applications too. So I want to take the sender object, and I need to let Visual Studio know and C# that it's a button. Right now, it's just an object. Notice it says object. That's the data type. If it's an object, is it the same as a control? No, right? So because Visual Studio doesn't know and C# doesn't know that it's a control, I won't have access to any of its properties, right? Example, the text property, which is what I want, right? The text property is what I really want from the button, right? So I need to cast it. Now, I'm going to declare a variable. This is where it gets a little funky for those people who've never seen it before. I want to declare a variable of type button, right? Because it's a button. It's a type, the type that I'm using is a button. And I'm going to call this calculator button. Here's my calculator button. I'm going to make it equal to the sender object, but I got a problem. It says underscore. And let me see what the error that I get is. It says my parameter object sender cannot implicitly convert type object to system Windows form button. Implicitly convert. It says an explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast? Who remembers how to cast stuff from, Java? Anybody? How do I cast something to something else? Actually, this is all C influenced languages kind of do it this way. Yeah. Parentheses. Right? I could do it this way. I could do this button, right? I just casted my sender as a button because it is a button that I'm casting. I know it's a button. Therefore, I can do this. The other way to do it is in C#. This is new syntax for you. I could do something like as button, right? Because what I'm saying is, hey, treat the sender button, the sender object as a button, and then that's the as method is actually built into C#. Okay, cool. I want to show the button that's been, whatever I click on, I want to show it in the result text box, right? Whatever button I click now, it doesn't matter how I do it. This is the first step this week. Next week, we'll go into more logic. Whatever button I push, it's going to go into that result text box. So what do I want to do? I want to say result text box dot text. It's the text object, right? Plus equals to my calculator button. Right, so calculator button dot text. Whatever button I pressed, I want to add to the string that is the result text box. Right now, the result text box has a empty string by default. Actually, it's a 0. So it's going to add on to the 0. It's not going to replace the 0. It's going to add on to the 0, right? And if this works, this little piece of code, without any kind of if statement, I don't have to use an if statement. I don't have to say if it's a plus, add the plus. If it's a minus, add them. I don't have to do any of that stuff. I just have to cast the sender as a button and get the text property, because all buttons have a text property. In fact, all controls, for the most part, that are displayed, a lot of them have a text property, right? And I want to display that text inside of the text box, in the text box, which is the result text box, the text property of the text box. Whew. Let's try it out and see if it works. Let's see if we get an error. So 8, 9, some kind of weird B, right? No matter what I press, it's going to keep making the text box bigger. And this is a good test too, because you can see that there's going to be a time when it can't go any bigger, and it won't go bigger. That's a problem. We got to figure that out, right? What happens in this case when I have a really big number that I want to calculate? That's another issue we got to handle, right? How do I handle that issue, right? Do I scale the font? Do I make my text box double lines, like much bigger, right? What do I do? There's lots of options here. We're going to handle that next week. But for the most part, you can see that our little function worked. Any number, any operator that you choose, anything, any symbol, whatever is being handled here. Now I can use a switch case. statement to switch depending on what it is, I can do something. Okay? So that's the challenge for you for next week. Think about how would you do it. Complete your, if you want to practice on the logic side, without me telling you anything, all right? I want you to try to complete your calculator for next week, okay? As a side project. It's no marks associated. Yes?
Can you repeat that again?
Ada?
Can you repeat it again?
Can I repeat what again?
How to add the numbers?
You mean the actual code? The code is right here. This is how I did it, right?
I did that.
Doesn't work for you, right? Well, the reason why it may not work for you is because on the calculator form itself, remember that each of these things has to have the same event. Notice the click event all points to the calculator button click event, right? I'm pointing everything so that it has a single click event. Instead of having individual events, right? It only has one. Only one calculator button click event. Otherwise, if you don't have a calculator, if it's not pointing to the same event, it'll all have their own events, and that's not good, right? Because it's a waste. Why would I do that? Look, I saved tons of code just now, as opposed to double-clicking and putting in my code over and over and over again. I would have had, how many buttons are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I like to 5 by 4. It's almost like 20 buttons, right? Minus 2, right? So 18 buttons. I would have had to make 18 events, and it would be the exact same code. That makes no sense from a programming perspective. Yeah.
Padding to the text box.
Okay. How would you do it?
There's no padding option in the properties.
Nope. There's no padding option in the properties. How would you do it? Think about it. I want you to think about it. I like it. I like your thinking. I want to add padding too, right? Because it's right justified, right? Okay. And there is no padding option. What you want to do is something like you want to move it over a little bit, number one, so it's not kind of hugging everything. That's number one. And you want to add padding this way and this way to both the right side and the left side. And if you notice, if I click on the text box, if I go to my properties, right? Let's take a look. Here's size, here's minimum size, here's font, here's color, here's lines, right? Here's location, here's margin. Right? 3, 3, 3, 3, 3.
But that moves the text box. So.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's margin, right? So so you're saying from the right, if I put in the margin of, I don't know, let's put 10, what does it do? You said it moves the text box, right? How about if I put to the right, 30? Does it do anything? Look. Nothing. But if I run it, does it do anything now? No. It doesn't move anything. Oh, look, there's a little bit of space, but it's aligned up with my buttons here. That's what it's doing, right? So that's not it. It's not the margin, right? Because that's the alignment that we're talking. Let's put this back to 3 the way it was, right? Maximum size, modifiers, multi-line, read-only, scroll bars, size of my text box, right? So where would it be if you're going to have it? If there's going to be anything in here that's going to be some kind of padding or whatever, and do I have the space for that? I want you to come back with me, take a look at it. There is a way of doing it, by the way, but I want you to figure it out, right? Huh? I could also add another blank space.
We can add spaces on the side.
Remember tricks? Tricks. I could add a space. I could do all kinds of other weird things, but spaces are really inefficient. Same thing.
I'm using the rich text box instead of the text box.
Rich text box is a totally different thing. Totally different control. And be careful with it because it may not respond the same way as a regular text box. Questions around this so far? Okay, I want you to spend the rest of the class working on assignment 1, right? Again, what I want you to do is I want you to work on the user interface for assignment 1. Now you have half an hour approximately, or 20 minutes, let's say before the next class, right? 20 minutes for you to do the user interface is plenty of time. There's way less buttons to do. The only thing that's going to stop you up is your logo, right? Otherwise, for the majority of the time, I think you can get your stuff done. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording now. I'm going to go around. I'll take questions, right?
I asked you in the break. You said you wanted to discuss in the class.
Tell me.
The question about the button, the name was in lowercase.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the method.
Oh, why is the button in lowercase and the method and how the method became uppercase? The default, what it should be, if you're from a naming convention, thank you for that. The default should be, I like to make my button all uppercase myself, because remember what I've asked you to do is I want you to make all of your buttons, the names of your buttons and controls, uppercase, upper camel case, right? So because your event handler follows that methodology, even though it's private, right? It should also be uppercase. Now, if you really wanted to, you could rename this with an underscore in there as well. Leave it alone, all right? If it automatically generates it for you, right? And if you made your button the right name, it should be okay. I'm okay with it, okay? That's the answer. One more thing before I go, right? Before I stop recording is what I'm saying. If you do a triple forward slash, like I talked about last time, what it does is it creates your Java doc equivalent in C#, where you can put in something like, event handler for all calculator buttons. In here, you can do that. And the other thing I didn't do is connect it to GitHub, which is what I promised I would do, right? So what I want to do with this one is I want to go to Team Explorer, right? Like I said before. Now, remember, I had some problems with GitHub last week. I'm sure I'm going to have the same problems this week because of my messed up thing here. I want to create, notice that my down in here, it says lesson 2. This is good. I want to say things like created basic calculator UI, user interface, and commit all, right? And then what I want to do is I want to go to home and sync. And if you have Visual Studio, the GitHub extension for Visual Studio installed, you should be able to do publish to GitHub. And it's going to ask you to go lesson 2. I'm going to put it inside Georgian College here, where it says COMP1004 Winter 2017 lesson 2, and click publish. Now, if I did everything correctly, and if I didn't mess things up, if I go to GitHub afterwards, right? So here's GitHub. And if I look at Georgian College, right? So here's Georgian. Then I should have lesson 2. Here's lesson 2, right? And if I click inside there, it should say lesson 2. And there should be everything in here that I talked about before, especially the calculatorform.cs, which has my little 2 lines of code, right? That does the basic calculations. Okay? So everything's up on GitHub for you. If you haven't been able to follow along, please download my form and check it out and see how yours differs than mine. Didn't take long for me to produce my form, and it shouldn't take that long for you to do your assignment 1. So let's leave you like this. Please finish your user interface for assignment 1. You're halfway there. Put it up on GitHub. That's what I recommend you do right away. Create a space for yourself on GitHub. Put it up on GitHub, right? Do a few comments. Put your comments, your name, your student ID, the app name, all the stuff that I put there in the requirements. Start putting stuff in there. And you almost have 50% of your mark today. That's awesome, right? That's part of your homework done. Okay, and I'll start recording. Guys, and for the people who are watching remotely, I'll see you next week. But for now, I'm going to come and go around and check everything else. The PowerPoints just support all the stuff I've been talking about today, right, in terms of tab stop and everything else. So if I didn't cover it here in the PowerPoint, it's because I've already covered it in an example. And this other PowerPoint, just for those people who are watching, right, for the PowerPoint that I've kind of put together. Oops, the wrong one I picked up. The other PowerPoint, which I converted to PowerPoint for, only has a few slides, and these few slides are all around kind of a high overview of classes and objects and how an application responds to events, which is kind of what I've already talked about. All right, so all the stuff I kind of talked about here in the PowerPoints. Nothing, nothing that I haven't covered already. All right, thanks so much, and we'll produce videos next week.